Wasn't always easy or pretty, but Penn State gets its most lopsided win over Rutgers in the James Franklin era. Once again, Tim Maiden, joined by my pal Marty Leap from Diaries.com. Marty, how are you doing, good sir?
Pretty good. Early on, it was a typical start to a Penn State Rutgers game. A little shaky early on. Rutgers coming out looking motivated. Penn State looking flat, and like you said, a little more lopsided than usual. But in the end, the typical ending of Penn State rolling to victory over Rutgers.
Yeah, and of course, as we mentioned, not always easy or pretty. Game started out with some rather shaky performances on special teams in particular. You had Barney and Moore, who had he had a rough day punting overall. Did have a nice one later on in the game, but early on, it was brutal to watch. He has one that lands probably around the 40, Rutgers 40, when it should have gone about 20 yards past that. And Rutgers starts with excellent field position. They end up kicking a field goal. The ensuing kickoff, Nick Singleton gets a 100-yard kickoff return touchdown, is first of his career. Very Saquon-esque kind of thing to have the running back take a kickoff for a touchdown. And, suddenly Penn State shifted momentum. You're feeling pretty good as a Penn State fan. And then what happens? The very next kickoff, Jake Pinniger, for whatever reason, instead of just trying to kick it into the back of the end zone for a touchback, tries to do, I don't know, some kind of coffin kick to the corner, like maybe hopefully that they can catch Rutgers off guard and maybe pounce on it. I don't know, but whatever. Aaron Cruikshank, Rutgers, probably their best skill player on the team and one of the Big Ten's best return men, grabs that kickoff, takes it all the way to Penn State's 20-yard line. And with the short field, Rutgers quarterback Gavin Winsat throws a touchdown pass. It's 10-7 Rutgers. I don't even know if we're even halfway for the first quarter at that point. And Rutgers has tied for the most number of points they had scored against Penn State since joining the Big Ten. And we can get a little more into Rutgers scoring futility against Penn State a little bit later. But at that point, you're thinking, all right, let's, can we cut it with the special teams miscues? If we can do that, then, perhaps this defense will settle down. They can start getting some pressure on Wimsatt, really, get him flustered. And sure enough, that's what started to happen. The defense really stepped up from there. They could pick up a scoop and score deep in Rutgers territory to make it 14-10. And then a little bit later, they're backed up in their own end zone and pressure's coming and Winsat. He throws up, a pass that doesn't seem to have much of a chance except to land in the arms of one Johnny Dixon, who looked like he had a pick six, but a block in the back penalty took it back. But Penn State's offense, which at the time still had yet to get a touchdown or really put together any good-looking drive, was able to finish the drive in the end zone, make it 21-10. And then things just kind of snowballed a bit from there. From there on, they kind of just took command and they led 28-10 at the half. And then gets a second. You're thinking the game is probably over at this point, just given how the defense has been rattling Gavin Wimsatt and just been shutting down the Rutgers ground game. And all of a sudden, first play of the first half, Rutgers throws a nice slant routes, and they almost take it to the house. Touchdown saving tackle from Penn State around in their own red zone. And a couple plays later, though, 3rd and long, and Penn State gets themselves another scoop and score. This time it's Jair Brown who does it and makes it 35-10. And from there, the route was absolutely on. The run game, which had been bottled up all afternoon, finally came to life. Katron Allen just was running all over that Rutgers defense. And, even Nick Singleton got some nice runs in there in the second half. And, just a matter of the Penn State defense coming up with scores, or at least, not allowing Rutgers to put together sustained drives, get them off the field quickly and tire out a Rutgers defense, which props to them. They were doing a pretty good job in the first half of not allowing Allen or Singleton to go off and really not allowing Penn State to get comfortable in its passing game. They definitely did a good job getting pressure on Sean Clifford, and they really – and Marty, you can probably get into this, but it seemed like the injuries on the O-line have been piling up over the last few weeks. It finally caught up to them today.
Yeah, you definitely finally saw that at times today. It was the first time since these injuries set in that you've seen the offensive line start to show some of the signs of that. I'm sure you can chalk some of it up to Rutgers defensive end Aaron Lewis, a former 4-star recruit who, coming out of high school, his final two schools were Penn State, Michigan. Went to Michigan, would transfer to Rutgers due to some health issues with his mother and wanting to be closer to home to her in New Jersey. So obviously can't fault a kid for that. But he looked like the former 4-star borderline top 100 recruit that he was. And he was definitely the best defensive lineman Penn State has played since the injuries have started to pile up. Made Drew Shelton look like a true freshman a few times. But for this to be, start number 3 of Drew Shelton's career, and for it to take until start number 3 for him to look like a true freshman, obviously that's a very good sign. And Drew would settle in and finish the game strong. And, as the game went on, Penn State's rushing game got going, put together over 200 yards rushing yet again. As from about the middle of the second quarter on, the pass protection was much better. Yeah, it's just all around great game for Penn State. I mean, you started a little sloppy, but, you and I talked about this for one of the air, and you mentioned that kickoff to Crookshank, whatever they're trying to do there. If not for some special team woes, Rutgers probably doesn't score in this game. Penn State, this is a game that was not as close as the 55-10 score. This is a game Penn State easily could have won 70-0 had they played a little cleaner. And that slant play to start the second half to Rutgers, that big gain. One thing I really want to highlight there, that is a play that Jair Brown is never going to want to relive again in his entire life. But to his credit, he helped clean that drive up when Curtis Jacobs just about sent Gavin Wimsatt to meet his maker on third down, and Brown scooped the ball and raced 70-plus yards to the end zone. So I'm sure Tig had to feel much better after getting beat on that play to have the drive end with him scoring a defensive touchdown to not only keep that play, that mistake of his of getting beat and letting the guy get behind him from burning Penn State, but for it to also lead to Penn State points. So, yeah, just great effort for the Nittany Lions today. The defense, phenomenal. I think they finished like 15 tackles for a loss, something like that. And they already led the country in tackles for losses coming in. Kobe King continues to just look like a budding, just future potential all-conference kind of middle linebacker. Abdul Carter, there's really no words left to describe Abdul Carter. Another huge game for him. And offensively, they're able to settle in, got that running game going. And one guy in offense I do want to highlight, I thought Trey Wallace played a really good game, having to step up and play a bigger role with Parker Washington out. I thought Wallace stepped up, played extremely well, had 3 catches for 49 yards, drew a pass interference penalty, ran some really good routes. The receiver group, I feel like no receiver on this team has grown more from the start of the year than Wallace. And I think Wallace could be in line for a really big season next year. But great job by the redshirt freshman to step up in the absence of Parker Washington and put together probably the best game of his college career so far.
Certainly, this was a game where, with Parker Washington not available and, well, he's done for the year from what they've announced. I'm still not sure what it was as he was playing last week, and I don't recall him leaving the game with an injury against Maryland. So I don't know what happened in between today's game and last week's game. But there's a chance for guys like Mitchell Tinsley, and yes, like I said, Trey Wallace had himself a pretty good game. 3 second best receiver, 3 catches of 49 yards behind only Tinsley, who had 5 catches of 63 yards. You saw the tight ends involved at times. They tried to feed Brenton Strange, and then Tyler Warren caught a touchdown pass. Caught the first offensive score for Penn State to make it 21-10, which kind of gave him a little cushioning going forward. So it was good to see that. And later on in the game, in the second half, when you saw Omari Evans get some run, you saw, I think, Khalil Dinkins, backup tight end, like probably 4th string tight end, get some action. And of course, we saw fan favorite Drew Aller play as well from about mid third quarter on. Uh, there was some good, some not so good, but 5 of 10, 42 yards, and he had a rushing touchdown, his first career rushing touchdown. So, congrats to Drew on that. Yeah, Marty, just what I guess your thoughts, real quick. You being the biggest Drew Aller stan of everyone on Black Sheep Diaries.
Yeah, I mean, I thought at times today Drew Aller definitely looked like a true freshman. Started slow, was one for his first five, and that included a really poor throw to Trey Wallace where he threw it behind him. It was almost intercepted when he had Wallace open for what would have definitely been at least a first down and maybe more. But after that throw, he settled in and hit 4 of his last 5 passes. Looked much better as he started to settle into the game. I didn't necessarily like how much Penn State was running him, especially some of the runs they had him do in this situation. Let's not risk getting him hurt, but it was still cool to see him get his first career rushing touchdown. Although I will say, I'm not going to lie, in that situation, I was definitely rooting. I've been rooting for this for 2 years now to see Tank Smith get a touchdown, see Tank Smith get the Long Boys necklace. I don't know if you picked it up on TV or not, but whenever Penn State was down at the 1 yard line there in the 4th and goal, the Penn State fans had migrated behind the end zone and were chanting, "We want Tank." So I was not the only one who wanted the Tank Smith touchdown, but I'll settle for Drew Allar's first career rushing touchdown. But yeah, I thought Drew, like I said early on, looked like a true freshman quarterback. And say what you want about Rutgers, they're never going to have the talent of other Big Ten teams, but as long as Greg Schiano is their coach, it is a defense that is always going to be coached well. They're always going to be coached to be in position, and they're always going to be aggressive. So that was probably part of it too. But yeah, I thought once he settled in, he definitely looked much better. I thought Mike Yurcich did a nice job. That middle screen to Khalil Dinkins, I really liked that call because at the time, Aller was 1 of 5, a nice little throw, started to get him into some rhythm, get him some momentum, and he finished the game strong. But this is why when you have young guys at any position, you want to be able to get them reps as much as possible in games like this, because some of those learning curves, some of those freshman moments, you want to get them out of the way when it's 55-10 against Rutgers, not next year when you're playing Iowa in week 4 or week 5 or whatever it is, and it might be a 17-13 game with 5 minutes to go in the 4th quarter. So that's part of the benefits. I think that's one thing that really could prove to be extremely beneficial for Penn State next year. You put their 2 losses aside, one of which against Michigan, unfortunately, they're able to get a lot of young guys some late run. Other than the Purdue game, they have just bludgeoned everybody this year. So they've been able to get their young guys a lot of playing time, a lot of experience. And when you look at a Penn State team that heading into next year should be a top 7 to 10 team and have a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement around it, the fact that you've seen so many guys who are going to be, you're going to need to take a big step next year, play so much this year. And it's not just Drew Aller. It's Deni Dennis Sutton, Abdul Carter, Cam Miller, KJ Winston, Omari Evans, Trey Wallace, Khalil Dinkins, so many guys, these offensive linemen. It's going to prove to be just absolutely vital and just irreplaceable next year.
Absolutely. And, I guess going back kind of to special team and really just the way special teams and defense stepped up early on when the offense was slow to come out of the gates. This just kind of comes across to the complementary football James Franklin always talks about. If one side of the ball isn't doing so hot, perhaps the other sides can come in and help. And you saw that on full display with Singleton's kickoff return touchdown, and then those 2 scoop and scores, and the interception, which gave Penn State's offense a short field to work with. Those things add up. But I also want to give a shout out to Rutgers punter Adam Korsak, who set an NCAA record for total punts. So hats off to him. But once again, just I don't know how much more I can sing the praises of Manny Diaz and its defense, but we talk about high risk, high reward, but man, they just brought the heat, brought the pressure, and that was enough to rattle Gavin Wimsatt, force him into making some bad throws, or just it seemed like almost immediately as soon as he took the snap, he was starting to roll out of the pocket. Like he never even gave himself a chance to stand in the pocket. And that's really when Manny's got you by the whats.
Yeah, I'm far from convinced Gavin Wimsatt is a legitimate Power 5 quarterback. I know he was a highly recruited kid, well, highly rated kid, I should say, maybe not necessarily highly recruited, and dubbed as the savior by a lot of Rutgers fans. But yeah, I'm not convinced he's a Power 5 quarterback at all. That said, Manny Diaz did a great job of just terrorizing him all day. This defense really has been something else this season outside of that Michigan game. And I know we've talked about it. I don't think that Michigan game was an accurate representation of this defense at all. I think that's a game Manny Diaz, especially with the game plan he had, he would love to have that one back. The guy is either a I'm not sure if it's finalist or semifinalist, one of the two for the Broyles Award, which goes to the top assistant coach in the country. I think he'll be back next year, but Penn State fans would better enjoy Manny Diaz while we have him because I can't envision him sticking around too long before he finds another head coaching job, especially because his tenure at Miami really wasn't that bad, especially when you look at what Mario Cristobal's doing right now. But with Adam Korsak, I want to comment on that. I came into the day hoping we'd see history. I wasn't sure we'd see it because we were going to need so many punts. But 11 punts later, we got it. History was made. My dad was here watching the game with me, and we were kind of joking about it. We were like, it's nice to make history, but that's probably some history you don't want to make. But, my dad made a good point because if you had him Korsak, they might not hate it because at least it gives you a lot of opportunity to build that NFL draft stock, which is a great point. And he may be a draftable punter because it's not just that he's punted so many times in his career. He is a very good punter. The comment you just had on the screen there, Tim, from Mark Edwards about him, 26 punts inside the 20 this year, along with 77. The guy is a very good punter. So he'll go on and do things on Sundays, but no, it's just kind of fitting that with Rutgers and with Big Ten and all the jokes that have been made over the years about punting is winning in the Big Ten for the NCAA's all-time leader in punt attempts to now reside in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no doubt. Just a friendly reminder, if you like what you see on this show, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe our Penn State Voice of College Football channel, trying to help grow that channel. We're currently at 554 subscribers. So thanks to everyone who's already done so. We're hoping we can get that to, 600, by the end of the month. So, like I said, if you enjoy what you see here, Marty and I are doing this every post game during the season. Of course, we've only got one more left, and that's Michigan State, who earlier today somehow lost to Indiana in 2 overtimes in a game where they were up by 17 early on.
They weren't just up by 17. Indiana, in a game that went to 2 overtimes, completed 2 passes and somehow found a way. So that also, I feel like, is Big Ten football at its finest.
It's Sparty No at its finest.
It is Sparty No.
I mean, it was the most Sparty. I mean, I watched the very end of regulation. It's tied at 31. They're down. Michigan State looks like they might even just get the touchdown, forget the field goal, but they get held, so they're going to kick a chip shot field goal, and the kicker doesn't even like shank. He just kicks it directly off. It was kicking from the left hash, so he couldn't even get it at like an angle. It just went straight, just past the left upright. Never got an angle on the kick, and so it was the most Sparty No thing you can imagine. And of course, they go on to lose it in 2 overtimes. So just all around, Sparty No performance. But you have to wonder what their mindset's going to be when they come to Happy Valley next week, because you got Penn State now sitting at 9-2. They just take care of business next weekend in Senior Day against, a reeling Sparty team. Good chance they might get an Orange Bowl or maybe Cotton Bowl berth, or if somehow both Ohio State and Michigan make the playoff, even a Rose Bowl bid. So I know Sparty still has a bowl game on the table if they pull off the upset next week, but Man, I got to wonder, are they going to pick themselves up after that performance, knowing they have to go play a motivated Penn State team?
Yeah, I know this is something you and I had talked about. I think we talked about on the show last week. I know we definitely have talked about it in our Black Diaries Slack channel and texting and that sort of thing. We both were kind of hoping Michigan State would win today, get them bowl eligible before they get here next Saturday, so they're not trying to play for that. As for the bowl situation, though, for Penn State, I mean, South Carolina is just went up by 2 scores against Tennessee. Obviously, a long way to go in that game, but the Vols losing definitely helps to start open up a path to Michigan and Ohio State both making the playoff, which would send Penn State to Pasadena. So see what happens there. But yeah, Penn State wins next week. I just have a hard time seeing a 10-win Penn State team with the draw and the brand that they are not wind up in a New Year's Six bowl. And even if they don't, you probably get like a Citrus Bowl, which might be Alabama. And, you get an Alabama team that is half, checked out.
Ole Miss being projected as a Citrus Bowl opponent.
Yeah, but even then, it's still where they were the last 2 years to have the chance to win an 11th game when you've won 11 games combined the last 2 years. That definitely means something. And really, the biggest thing is, I know we've talked about this on here before too, but it gives you the ability in the recruiting trail.
Yes, Mark, the game's at Penn State next week.
It gives you the ability in the recruiting trail to tell kids, hey, 2020 was a fluke because of COVID. 2021 was a fluke due to injuries. Hey, we're back on track. And even in the portal, gives you the chance to pitch to kids. Look how close we are. You come here, you might be the piece that helps put us in the playoff next year. So no matter what happens in the bowl season, this season, especially if they win next week, has undoubtedly been a raging success for the Nittany Lions.
No doubt. To be here on the precipice of a 10-win season, that not something either you or I predicted when we did our season preview show back in August. So it's definitely a welcome sight, especially what happened the last 2 years. Definitely needed a bounce back season like the one they're having currently. And, just with the pieces in place that are returning next year, future feels bright. You look at the schedule for 2023, it's fairly manageable. You get West Virginia at home to open the season, and very good chance they have a new head coach. And, that's a trip to Happy Valley is not ideal for a new head coach's very first game coaching his team. So you kind of get West Virginia in a vulnerable spot. And then, you have Delaware the following week. And then you go on the road at Illinois, who, yeah, that will be a tough game, but it's not, it's not like you're not going at Michigan, you're not going at Ohio State. And plus there's a little revenge factor there. Most of the kids who were on the team last year, during that inexplicable loss will be on the team next year. And I'm sure, they'll be itching to avenge that defeat. And then you get Iowa the following week, which is probably ended up being the whiteout game since Michigan is in November, and there's no way Harbaugh will agree to make that a night game. So I imagine that'll be the whiteout. And that's, again, another revenge game. They've beaten you the last 2 times, and team absolutely should have boat raced the last time, if not for Sean Clifford going down. And really what kind of makes that even more of a revenge game, and a game that, all the fans have circled as well, is just, the fans booing the Penn State players who got injured, thinking they were just faking it to slow down Iowa's offense, which, which is just a joke.
That potent Iowa offense.
And then you got Kirk Ferentz saying the fans aren't stupid and they can smell a rat. And so, it's definitely touched a nerve in the entire Penn State fan base, and probably, I'm sure, with James Franklin and staff and the players too. I'm sure they got that one. They'll have that one circled as well. And then you finish it with September trip at Northwestern, who, that's a game they should win. I mean, I'm sure they'll probably can't be any worse than this year, but are they going to be that much better next year? Probably not enough to beat Penn State. So you get that, and then you get a bye week, and then you get UMass before you have to go on the road to Ohio State third week of October. So very good chance Penn State can find itself undefeated when they head into Columbus. And, hopefully this, with what they've got coming back next year, they'll once again have a team that's equipped to give the Buckeyes all they can handle. Now, of course, I don't know. Not going to say that results in a win, of course. That's going to be very, very difficult. But I think they will give themselves a fighting chance for sure. Marty, just your thoughts. Look. Thinking about just this past season, and he's looking ahead a little bit to next year.
Yeah, you're looking ahead to next year. One thing I will say on the whiteout, I agree it's probably going to be Iowa for the reasons you said. That said, November in Happy Valley, if you can get that Michigan game to be a 3:30 kick, it's going to be dark by the second quarter. You conceivably could pull a whiteout there if you wanted, but I agree with you. Most likely it'll be the Iowa game. Looking ahead, I think next year with Ohio State, one thing that's going to be big for that game, when is the last time Penn State played Ohio State and Penn State had the better quarterback? I couldn't tell you. I even in the Trace McSorley years, maybe in 2017, you could argue Trace was, or 2016 or 2017, Chase was better than JT Barrett. But in 2017, JT Barrett put together a fourth quarter for the ages. I'm not saying Drew Aller will be better than most likely Kyle McCord, but it's definitely possible. I mean, McCord was a 5-star in his own right, but I think that's a big thing where, you look ahead to Ohio State next year, even if Penn State doesn't have the better quarterback as it seems possible, you're probably looking at Aller and Kyle McCord or transfer, whatever it may be, probably being on pretty equal footing. And that goes a long way. I mean, just look at this year. The single biggest difference between Penn State and Ohio State this year was quarterback play. And had Penn State gotten even decent quarterback play, they would have beaten the Buckeyes with CJ Stroud putting together a 350-yard performance. So I think that could be big for next year too. I mean, you look at the next season, there's definitely a lot of parallels to the way people are going to view this team heading into next year and the way people were set to view this team heading into 2020. So hopefully, for not just Penn State football, but for life in general, there's not a global pandemic waiting around the corner this time to derail what should be James Franklin's most talented team yet, the way a global pandemic derailed what would have been his most talented team yet in 2020. Yeah, fingers crossed on that one. Like I said, that goes a little bit deeper than just Penn State football too. But no, in all seriousness, it should be, especially if Penn State takes care of business against Michigan State next week and does win a bowl game, you're going to see more buzz, more excitement, more talk, electricity, whatever it is, around this team going into this offseason than you've had around Penn State in an offseason since going into 2017. And Mark, I'm sorry, he may have been short, but that was one of the greatest Ohio State Michigan games in the history of Penn State football. So it's fitting it's Michigan State week, because that was one of the cooler Penn State games, not to go off on tangent, one of the cooler Penn State games I've ever been at, that 2016 Michigan State game. The tailgate scene was so much different than usual because people were just huddled around TVs watching the Ohio State Michigan game. And I remember being in the stadium, Penn State's trailing and calls a timeout on a 3rd and long. And during the timeout, the whole stadium erupts. And I remember afterwards, the players were like, what is going on? And that's when they realized that's when the game had gone final and Ohio State had won. And Penn State then went on to outscore. Like, it's almost like that ignited the team because Penn State outscored Michigan State something like 42-6 the rest of the way that game. And won because I think at the time, if I remember correctly, at the time it was like 9-3, and the final score wound up like 45-15 or something. So like it was like after that, Penn State just got ignited and took off, knowing that they were 1 win away from going to Indy. So he may have been short, but it led to one of the most memorable Penn State Michigan State games in program history for Penn State, and then obviously one of the most memorable Big Ten championship games ever, regardless of the teams.
So our buddy Mark's got a couple questions. I guess we'll start this one because apparently it's been on the Auburn's 24/7 site. They've mentioned Franklin as some kind of secret candidate being vetted. So they wouldn't Happy Valley talking about Franklin moving along, or is it all good? I I haven't really seen. Of course, on Lions 24/7 board, they're talking about what Auburn's saying, but there doesn't seem to be a real concern about it. And if you want to think about this logically for a second too, James Franklin, he's finally got a roster together that is capable competing for Big Ten championship, maybe breaking through into the playoffs. So I don't know why he would suddenly go abandon that, especially when, for the first time ever, he's got a president and athletic director that are on the exact same page as him. He has to go begging them for resources. Like they know what he needs, and if he comes to them, they will not hesitate to give Franklin whatever he's requesting. So I wouldn't worry about Auburn, especially being a dumpster fire that it is right now. I'm sure they'll end up hiring Lane Kiffin or somebody decent, but I'd be very shocked if it's James Franklin. And the other question I got here, Mark also asked, Penn State wins out in bowl, preseason top 10 next year. I would say so. I'd have a hard time seeing them being left out of the preseason top 10, especially if they end up winning their bowl game, wherever that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think the preseason top 10 thing is probably going to happen regardless of what happens in the bowl game. Just you bring so much back. You factor in Drew Alar, you factor in these running backs. There's just going to be talent all over the field. Abdul Carter is going to go into next year viewed as one of the best defensive players in the Big Ten. There's just going to be all kinds of talent on that team. And as for James and Auburn, it makes no sense to me. If I remember correctly, when I read the post from the Auburn mods or whoever it was on their board, it was basically, hey, Auburn's going to try and swing for the fences, look for them to reach out to James Franklin and Dabo Swinney, but it's probably not going to go anywhere. And with Auburn, like I can understand some of the appeal. Yes, they've won a national championship much more recently than Penn State. That said, that's because they paid Cam Newton more money than Mississippi State did. Cam carried that team that year. And at Auburn, Mark makes a great point there about being fired. Gus Malzahn probably never should have been fired by Auburn. Gus Malzahn beat Alabama more consistently than any other coach in the Big Ten. Got Auburn to a national championship game, even though they came up short. Got him to the SEC title game an additional time to that. Gus Malzahn was doing a fine job at Auburn. So that's part of the thing, too, with Auburn. At Penn State, James Franklin's always going to have all the job security in the world, especially with this new contract of his. And like you said, Tim, him to finally have a president and an athletic director that are, step in step with him on what needs to be done for the football program, which is something he's never had while at Penn State, that goes a long way as well. I don't see any reason why he would leave Penn State right now for very many jobs, especially Auburn.
Precisely. Let's see. I got another. Oh, here we go. Mark also asked, are natives restless or a 2-loss season cool? I mean, I guess the natives were, they were restless coming into this year, just given how rough the last couple of years were. But, 10-2 exceeds, the entire fan base's expectations. We were, you and I said 9-3, Marty. I saw a lot of 8-4s. We're all thinking this would be some kind of transition-y type year. And yeah, it still was a transition type year, but a much more successful transition kind of year than we anticipated. So, 10-2 again, 10-2, New Year's Six Bowl after what happened the last couple of years. Yeah, I would gladly take that. Now, these next couple of years, my expectations would be they get either win the Big Ten again, or maybe break into the playoff, especially if come 2024, the playoff expands to 12 teams, and you'll still have the core of that 2022 class still intact on the team at that point, since they'll all be juniors or redshirt sophomores. Plus you'll have 23 class, they're stacking upon that, which is looking like probably a top 12 class when it's all said and done. And, and I'll say, as even though that 2021 class was rough, that was affected in large part because of COVID. They still had a pretty good hit rate on those guys. Especially I think of Zaki Wheatley being one of them. I'm sure there's others that I'm forgetting. So I'm just thinking off the top of my head at the moment, but I'm sure Marty can fill me in on that. So yeah, the expectations will definitely be higher these next couple of years. And I really think these next 2 years are going to be probably the most important in the James Franklin era. If they can get over the hump and actually make it into the playoff by 2024, then you may see Franklin coach his team for the remainder of the decade. If not, then it gets dicey. So it'll be interesting to see either way, though.
I wholeheartedly agree. What's ahead for James Franklin is huge. I just real quick, you mentioned that 2021 class. Like you said, small class, but Landon Tangwall out for the year with injury, but looking like an all-conference kind of offensive lineman when healthy. Kalen King might be a first-round pick at cornerback. Jalen Reed has been a tremendous safety. Zaki Wheatley, who you mentioned. Kobe King quickly rounding into a potential all-conference linebacker. Trey Wallace, who we talked about earlier, probably has big things at a wide receiver. Liam Clifford, who's impressed in limited action. Khalil Dinkins, who's impressed in limited action. Jordan Vandenberg, who is already a rotational guy at defensive tackle. And he's probably never going to do it at Penn State for reasons that are not his own. But the quarterback in that class was Christian Veillard, who has shown he's very capable of starting at the Big Ten level. So real tip of the cap to James Franklin and his staff for having the hit rate they had with that class with COVID. But yeah, I think right now things are set up for 2023 to be the most talented roster James Franklin has had since at least 2017 and potentially better than that team. That 2017 team, in my opinion, was good enough to win a national championship, but everything went to hell in the fourth quarter in Columbus, and then the next week in the most Penn State, Michigan State of fashions, just with the lightning delay and that just inexcusable late hit on Marcus Allen that led to the field goal and just, yeah, but I think this team, I'm not saying they're going to be better than that team, but I think they're going to be the best team he's had since then. It could be better than that team. And by 2024, when the playoff expands to 12 teams with the roster Penn State should have in 2024, they absolutely should make the playoff that year. So, yeah, I agree. These next 2 years are going to be very important for James Franklin and what his future is going to look like at Penn State.
Absolutely. Let's see. I don't think we have more questions from our pal Mark or anyone else. Any final thoughts, Marty, before we sign off?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, it was nice to see Penn State, especially after the sluggish start, come out and just take care of business against Rutgers. I mean, they normally do, but they normally don't just stick it to them the way they did. So that was cool to see, fun to see, especially Rutgers. I mean, we don't need to get into it on here for a lot of reasons, but the behavior of their fans when Penn State went there in 2014 is something I know I, along with many other Penn State fans, will never forget. So just continuing to stick it to them year after year since then makes it even better. Yeah, all full steam ahead to Michigan State next week. It's Sparty. Michigan State could be 0-11, and I would feel uneasy going into this game because just weird things happen when Penn State plays Michigan State. I have seen Michigan State teams that are much worse than this find ways to beat 9-2 Penn State teams before. So, yeah, Penn State needs to come out, play a clean game. I would like to think that Spartan defense is one that they can just run all over because Michigan State's defense right now cannot stop anybody's rushing attack. And Nick Singleton and Katron Allen is going to be the best backs they've faced probably since they faced Corum and Edwards when they played Michigan. So there's no reason Penn State shouldn't be able to run all over this Michigan State defense next week and get out of there with a victory. And most likely punch your ticket to a New Year's Six bowl in the process.
Yeah, actually, I almost forgot to say, I was looking on Winspedia at the entirety of the Penn State Rutgers series. Today was the most lopsided victory ever between the two schools. Don't know if you realize that.
I did not. I mean, I'm not surprised because, I mean, when you have two legitimate Power 5 or, back in the day, BCS conference teams or whatever terminology you want to put on a play, you're not going to see too many 55-10 type beatdowns. But no, I didn't realize that, but not totally shocking and fun to see.
Yes, and as we mentioned, I think before we hit record, it's only the second time since they joined the Big Ten that Rutgers has scored double digits on Penn State, which last time that was the 2014 game. They put up 10. Once again, they put up 10 today. In the previous games before that, they put up no more than 7 points. And, in most of the games, I think there's only, I guess we count today, really like most of the games that they played so far, they played 9 times since rejoining the Big Ten. Most of them, they haven't even reached the end zone. So this is kind of a rarity today for them to do so. And they still have yet to reach the end zone more than once against Penn State in a game since joining the Big Ten. So lots of futility streaks going on there for Rutgers in this series. Maybe there'll come a day where they remedy that. Schiano, like I said, is right guy for the program, but they still have their limitations at the moment. So this is a good beatdown to see as you get ready to try and beat Sparty next week and get that 10th win. Hopefully, be playing down in Florida or Texas, maybe California around New Year's time. So just one more thing, blackshoediaries.com. You can catch Marty and I's work there. Marty will have your Twitter reactions post up soon. All of my position grades up tomorrow. And also a turning point segment up on Monday. We'll examine a point in the game where where the momentum permanently shifted in one team's favor. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, basketball season now in full swing. So Marty and I help do basketball coverage. And we have other great writers on the site who handle wrestling, which is once again looking to win a national title. We got some hockey coverage going. Even like when it's not football season, we're still plugging away at blackshoediaries.com. So that's your home for Penn State sports coverage. Once again, for Tim and Marty, thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next week.